Pressured? Need financing? No problem. Bryan Honda works with multiple lenders to get you approved fast with competitive rates that make sense for you. Plus, our certified service department is here long after the sale, keeping your Honda running strong for years. Bryan Honda, 4104 Rayford Road in Fayetteville, or you can visit online, bryanhonda.com. Your road starts here. Nobody deal, not now.
WIDU Lauren.
Rounds live on 99.7 FM, 1600 AM.
We air every second and fourth Tuesday of the month.
Making Rounds Live.
The purpose of this show is to bring you information on health and wellness.
Here's the host of Making Rounds Live, Omega Jones.
Live. I'm your host, Omega Jones. Today's topic, it hit close to home with me. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're having a real conversation about mental health on today's broadcast. Many people deal with stressors like anxiety, depression, burnout, and grief, and they are on this emotional roller coaster, and they are doing this in silence. Today, we will remind you that you are not alone, and it's okay to ask for help. Now, before we get started, remember that this broadcast is for informational purposes only. This is not a time for you to self-diagnose, especially with the topic we are discussing today. So if you or a friend, loved one may be suffering from anything that we may discuss today, what I want you to do is find yourself a healthcare professional. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us this morning is Elizabeth Cooper. She is a licensed outpatient psychotherapist with Cape Fear Valley's Behavioral Health Care. Elizabeth, we've already started the conversation before the broadcast, so thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today.
It is my honor to be here with you today.
Now, before we get started, give our listeners a little brief description about yourself. Who is Elizabeth Cooper and the work that you do?
Okay. So I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm a veteran. I was with the military in a variety of capacities for about 15 years. I went to Iraq in 2008, 2009. When I returned home, I really wanted to find my purpose, to be a support to my community and my neighbors. And so I sought out training as a mental health therapist. I achieved my LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker, and now I work with the Community Mental Health Center for Cape Fear Valley, primarily with adults, helping them manage the challenges that they find in their lives.
May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Why is it so important for communities to have open conversations about mental health?
So mental health is a challenge that many people experience, but very few actually seek out the care. And one of the things that I find critically important about mental health is because good mental health equals happy, healthy families. And the relationship aspect of having good mental health and feeling that connection with people and being able to communicate in a way are things that you can learn through getting therapy or receiving mental health care.
Many people, they deal with stressors like anxiety, depression, burnout, grief, as we talked about prior to the broadcast. And like I was saying, they're on this emotional roller coaster. And sometimes people think mental health is only about depression and those serious mental issues. What exactly does mental health include? And why is it so valuable?
Right. So just like there's a lot of emphasis on improving our physical health, there should be as much of an emphasis on improving our mental health, because they're very much interrelated, right? Mental health is a variety of different things. Like I said, communication, managing our emotions, relationships, all of these things play into how much satisfaction and contentment we find in our own lives, and to some extent, peace, right? We all want a sense of peace in our lives. And so getting mental health care and working on your mental health can help you achieve a more peaceful, contented life. It's hard work, I'm not going to lie. There's definitely work associated with doing mental health, but it's much like going to the gym. It's really hard when you first start out, and then as you get into a routine and you start doing the things on a regular basis, it becomes easier. It's the same thing with mental health.
Ladies and gentlemen, joining us this morning, Elizabeth Cooper, a licensed outpatient psychotherapist with Cape Fear Valley Health's Behavioral Health. Elizabeth, we hear a lot about stress and burnout. You mentioned it earlier. How can we tell the difference between normal, everyday stress and something that actually may require professional help?
So stress is actually necessary in a human life. Stress encourages growth. We learn to overcome, we learn what our capacities are by having some stress. But when stress paralyzes us or creates a situation in which we have relationships that are just blowing up all around us, or situations in which our physical health is very much being affected by our mental health. A struggle with sleep is often a big indicator that something is going on, because our mind doesn't rest. It's this, right? So it's a balance, right? Knowing the difference between stress that is normal and toxic stress that's keeping us from being able to function. I think that's really the key. Is it impacting your functioning?
Many families dealing with financial pressures right now, from the overall cost of living, just as the kids say, life is lifing. How can financial stress and economic uncertainty, especially like we're going through right now, how can that affect someone's mental health?
So back in the 50s, there's this amazing psychologist, Abraham Maslow, and he created the theory of the hierarchy of needs. And basically, it really addresses human functioning, right? So at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs is survival needs, right? Heat, food, air, water, those things, if you don't have it, that's all you can think about. Like, that is the focus of everything about your life. I need these things. The next one up comes safety and security, right? And I find there's a lot of overlap between those two, because safety and security, sometimes that's jobs, right? You lose your job, that's your safety and security. Well, you're right back down on that bottom level with your survival needs, right? So it's very important to address those two levels before you can get to love and belonging, esteem needs, and then self-actualization, which is not worth talking about right now. But having economic insecurity is fundamental to those two needs, the survival needs and the physical and security needs. And in our country, sometimes we really struggle to focus on those needs. It's critical for the functioning of any society, any community, that those two bottom levels are addressed, and addressed in a way that is equitable.
What are some of the warning signs that financial stress may actually be impacting someone's mental health?
Irritability winds up being one of the major indicators that something's not going well. Irritability, again, is usually reflected in our relationships, can get us into trouble at work or at school. And that sleep deprivation that I was talking about, they kind of walk together. If we're under this stress and we're worried about what's going to happen at work tomorrow, I heard that they're talking about layoffs or whatever. It's really hard to sleep.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to focus on doing all the things that you need to do to ensure health in your mental health.
Ladies and gentlemen, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are having a real conversation about mental health this morning with Elizabeth Cooper. Miss Cooper, she is a licensed outpatient, notice I said licensed, outpatient psychotherapist with Cape Fear Valley Health's Behavioral Health. Anxiety affecting adults, children, and teens. What are what can I talk today, please? What are some of the common signs that we should pay attention to?
So anxiety really is a demonstration of restlessness, right? Not being able to sit still, not being able to focus on things. You're hearing a lot of the ADHD type of symptoms, but there is some overlap there. Anxiety is to some extent normal in some ways, because we're all a little anxious when we're trying something new. We all get a little anxious when a big test is coming up or something like that. That's kind of the normal range. When you get into the anxiety where you're afraid that you're going to lose your job, but there's been no write-ups, no situation that would justify that kind of anxiety. That's an anxiety that needs to be treated, because you're going to dysregulate your emotions based on something that's likely not even an issue, because you're I don't want to say borrowing trouble, but you're borrowing trouble from an issue that doesn't
That's
exist.
not even there.
Right. There's also, some people recognize anxiety is really a compulsion. People who have OCD, that compulsion to do things, and if it doesn't happen, the dysregulation that they feel, that panic that they feel, can lead to panic attacks, some serious mental health issues. And so if your concerns and your worry is about something realistic, test, some new thing that you're having to engage in, meeting somebody new to some extent. But if you walk out your door and you are terrified, then you need to seek some care.
Depression, it can look different from person to person. During my battle with grief, as we were talking before the broadcast, people never knew when I was having a bad day, because I kept that feeling, I kept it tight, and I kept it guarded, especially when I was in the public eye. The only time that I would let my guard down was when I was in the safety of my own home. What are some of the warning signs? Well, let me add this. People really didn't want to see Omega grieve. They wanted Omega to go back to the person that she was, but they didn't understand Omega will never be that person again. So what are some of the warning signs that someone may be struggling with depression?
So one of the main ones is fatigue. People tend to want to sleep a lot when they're feeling depressed. They want to isolate. They want to get away from other people. They want to live in the bubble where they can feel those emotions without the fear of judgment. And I think that was very clear in your example that you just gave. Crying a lot, that's a visible demonstration of depression. Everybody should feel safe in crying, when they need to. But if you cry all the time, like a commercial comes on, you find yourself crying and things of that nature, then that's an indication that something is going on that you might need to process with a professional. The things that get scary with depression is when we start talking about suicidality. And suicidality, the signs that we become very concerned about is when somebody starts gathering up things in which to plan to end their life or giving away all of their possessions. So that's something that we're always kind of on the lookout for, because there is depression that can be managed very well. And then there is the suicidality, that some people have intrusive thoughts that, I don't even understand why I'm here anymore. And I'm here to tell you, every person viewing this or listening to this has worth. Your worth is wake up in the morning, bedhead, dragon breath, you are worthy, right? You don't have to do anything to earn or prove your worth. You are an asset to this world. And as that asset, please seek out care if you're thinking about doing something that's going to be permanent. Please, that's what we're here for.
Something else that I did was I went back to work. And that's what a lot of people do. They go back to work, or we go back to work. We start taking care of others, and we do it with a smile. And because that's basically what society expects us to do. So why can mental health challenges be difficult to recognize in some cases?
Just because of the things that you said. We attempt to function even when we're not feeling very functional, right? And the society, especially with grief, it's one of those things that we're told to just get over, let it go. And the reality is that grief is a demonstration. It is a sign of love, right? Because we don't grieve people we don't care about. We don't grieve people we don't love. And so in that regard, it should be honored, right? And in our society, if you aren't performing a function, supporting society as a whole, then you're seen as giving up, right? Some people, everyone grieves differently. Everyone experiences depression differently. Everyone functions a little bit differently when they're under stress. It's important to seek out care when that's needed. And it's also all right to give yourself time to rest, to recuperate from something traumatic that might have happened to you.
My BFF, she always says, give yourself grace, Omega. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Elizabeth Cooper with us today. Elizabeth is a licensed outpatient psychotherapist with Cape Fear Valley's Behavioral Health. Social media. This put me on my soapbox, okay? It can impact mental health, and I don't think people understand how badly it can impact mental health, but it can impact it in positive ways, and it can impact it in negative ways. What are you saying? You said mainly you deal with adults, but what are you seeing in adults, and have you also seen it in teens?
I have. So it is good and bad, right? There's a lot of information in social media on different mental health diagnoses. And I have a lot of people who come in and they tell me, this is what I have. And I'm like, okay, here's my book. Let's go through the book.
And how long did you go to school? Never mind, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And on the opposite side of that, if they're looking at these things and they're seeing symptoms that they relate to, it gets them in for care, right? Because they recognize that it is something that needs to be treated. So in that regard, there are some positives to it. Now, when I have somebody who's just, this is what I have, I don't want to hear anything else, that represents some challenges. But generally speaking, we're trained to coach people and help them understand what certain diagnoses, how they impact functioning, and how, one diagnosis is very similar or has some overlap with another diagnosis, things of that nature. And so it's very important that if you're doom scrolling or, looking at a bunch of medical information and diagnosing yourself, that you actually get in front of somebody who has that training so that they can really help you.
Yeah, stay away from Dr. Google, in other words.
Yeah.
How important is it for people to unplug? We're going to use the word occasionally, but I'm going to say, how important is it for a person to unplug so they can protect their peace?
So I really believe that there is a lot of emphasis on social media, and a lot of people are actually developing their identity through what they're finding on social media. And that becomes a challenge because what you're seeing on social media often isn't authentic. And secondly, it may not speak to your circumstances. And so striving to embrace a lifestyle that you just don't have access to is going to create a lot of distress for you. The other thing is on social media and in life in general, just people have a negative bias, right? It is much easier for a individual to remember and identify negative events than it is for them to identify positive events. And so when people get on social media, 90% of what's going through their minds is negative. It's not often that there are sites out there that are very much focused on positivity, and that's great. But social media that most of the teenagers and young adults that I see that come across are very negative, and they really take that on as part of their identity when it's pushed at them.
They really do. They really and truly do. Elizabeth, the word trauma, excuse me. I see that word popping up more and more, and I hear it more and more during casual conversations. What's the difference between trauma and a life event that causes temporary emotional pain?
So, a life event that causes temporary emotional pain is akin to grief, right? So, grief is loss is a part of life. It's just part of the human experience, right? Mm-hmm. And to some extent, when we experience loss, it is the recognition that something that was important to me is no longer present, and I have to adjust the way I do things, the way I think about things, mm-hmm. right? Trauma, the American Psychological Association, I'm going to give you the definition, is an emotional response to an event that results in significant fear, helplessness, or long-lasting negative effects on persons' functioning, attitudes, and perception of safety. When I think about events that fall into this category, right? When you have a traumatic event, you're in a car accident, mm-hmm. right? That is going to impact your functioning. Some people are afraid to get back in a car. Some people refuse to get behind the wheel again. Mm-hmm. And so that's impacting your functioning. Your whole life is now changing because you need additional supports because you're not able to get into a car, right? Attitudes. When you have a traumatic event, some people actually embrace more chaos, especially if they've had sustained trauma over a long period of time. That's where they find their comfort zone, is in chaos. But chaos is only going to aggravate your mental health and cause relationship issues and interpersonal issues. So that definitely needs treatment. Perception of safety. Right? When especially when I look at people who are dealing with domestic violence, child abuse, things of that nature, their sense of safety is corrupted by those experiences, and they struggle to trust in the future, and that limits their ability to have these connections with people who may show them that there are safe people out there.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Elizabeth Cooper, in-studio guest today on Cape Fear Valley Health's Making Rounds Live. Elizabeth, many people are struggling silently because, as you mentioned earlier, and as we were saying before the broadcast, they're afraid of being judged. Mm-hmm. And as I said, and I'll say it during the broadcast as well, I didn't want my business to get in the street. So why does the stigma around mental health, why is that still there?
I think there's a lot of reasons for it. We could go back to historical, back when we had insane asylums and things of that nature. And that's not a good term for that, but it wasn't regulated in the way that it needed to be regulated, and it was abused in a lot of different ways. And so we as a culture have moved away from it, but that memory still resides in us, right? If I go to see a mental health person, they may lock me up and put me away somewhere. So there is fear regarding what that outcome might be. Rarely do people's difficulties rise to the level where we think they need inpatient care. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, inpatient care is much more narrow focused. It's stabilization. And then we refer to mental health so that we can help you learn the skills so that you don't get destabilized again. Mm-hmm. We get you on the medications that are going to help you function better so you don't have these challenges. Additionally, like we talked about before the session, is the fear that, I'm going to walk in here, tell somebody my deepest, darkest secrets, and then Joey down on the corner is going to know my information, right? Mm-hmm. Now, as clinicians and doctors and people who are involved in mental health, we are held to a standard, right, by HIPAA, by our own ethical obligations to the practices that we engage in. And that should never be a worry, right? And there are consequences for those who do not take those things seriously. And so I would encourage people to get comfortable, right, with your therapist. If you get to choose what you divulge, right? Sometimes I'll be in my third or fourth session before somebody brings something up that I'm like, oh, this is something we need to focus on. Mm-hmm. And that is okay. I don't want to push somebody into giving me information that they're not comfortable giving me, right? Not every therapist is going to fit you. Right? So even when you go in for care, when you finally make that decision to demonstrate the strength of seeking out care, you might get in front of somebody and you're like, this isn't working for me. That's okay too. Don't give up. Look for the one that's going to work for you, because they're out there. Yeah. We all are trained, but we all have our different takes on how we do what we do. And that's what makes that individual experience special.
You mentioned the military, mm-hmm. and the military, I know for a fact, you just do not.
There's a lot of stigma associated in the military.
So what word of advice do you have for military who are listening right now?
For leaders, I would definitely encourage leadership to make it a critical element of how your soldiers operate, right? In the military, you have deployable categories, and part of what makes you deployable is doing your dental checkups and getting your dental needs taken care of, your physical needs. You're getting checkups on a regular basis to check on your physical health. Mental health should be a part of that process. Mental health should be one of the elements that make you either deployable or non-deployable, because we want those soldiers who are in those situations to be capable and not only physically but mentally to handle the stressors that they're going to experience in those areas.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're having an interesting conversation about mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Elizabeth Cooper is taking time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. She is a licensed outpatient psychotherapist with Cape Fear Valley Behavioral Health. Elizabeth, what would you say to someone who, we've already talked about the military, but let's talk about folks who are just embarrassed. They're nervous about seeking therapy. Do you have a word of advice?
Trust is something that is earned, right? And it is very difficult, I think, for many to trust that when they walk into a room and they're meeting somebody who's in reality a stranger, that person is going to be able to understand the choices that person had made to that point, right? I'm a dialectical behavioral therapist trained in DBT type of therapy, and one of the assumptions that we make is when a person walks in our door, up until that point, they have been doing the best that they can with the resources they have, the information that they have, the capabilities that they have. And so I'm not making any judgments about what you did to survive before you walked in that door. I'm just there to meet you where you are and help you navigate your future in the direction that you want to go. The treatment plans that we come up with are very collaborative. We are working with our patients to determine what they want. I'm not telling anybody how you should be. It's about what your goals are for your future, and I'm there to help you in whatever capacity I can.
Elizabeth, men and mental health. I'm a man. I don't need it. They suffer in silence. Why is it important for men to prioritize their emotional health also?
Again, I think it's very much regarding trust. I think there is a societal expectation that they're just supposed to tough it out and make it work. And the reality is that many of us have experienced things in our childhood or even in our lives that have created within us learned behaviors that aren't effective as an adult. How we manage to deal with something when we were 14 or 15 years old isn't going to work when we're 34, right? And so the challenge for most men, I find, and I will honestly say that, in all of my time working in mental health, the vast majority of clients I see are women. It's usually a much smaller caseload of men. And the recognition that the strength and the courage it takes to make that statement, I need help, can be extremely challenging with the societal expectations that a lot of men are under. And it does take strength. I mean, it really, really does. And it should be seen as a strength and not a weakness.
It really should.
It's going to require a societal shift.
Parents, they're becoming increasingly concerned about their children's emotional health. I see it on a daily basis. What are some of the signs that a child or a teen may need help?
Angry outbursts are a big indicator because, especially for young children, they don't have the ability to regulate their emotions, right? So when they're feeling overwhelmed or upset, it's full-on emotion time because they don't know how to say, right now I'm feeling really angry, right? And so as adults, it's our job to kind of coach them like, okay, I see you're really upset. Tell me what you're feeling. What's going on? Explain to me why these emotions are coming up in you, and give them the time to communicate. You have to listen, right? You have to sit back and recognize that their experience is the experience of a child that age. They don't have all the information that you have. They haven't they haven't lived through the things that you have lived through. And so to them, these things are end of the world. And you're sitting there as an adult like, it's not a big deal. That's very invalidating, right? Because to them it is. They don't have the information or the experience that you do. And so being able to sit back and be open and receive the information that they're giving you without judging them, without punishing them. If you're having a open and honest two-way communication with your child or a friend, the recognition that putting your perspective on what they should be doing limits their ability to make choices for themselves, right? It may have worked for you, but it may not work for them. The other super big sign is when a child all of a sudden turns away from preferred activities. Maybe they love to play soccer and all of a sudden they refuse to go. Maybe they love science class and now they're not doing their homework. When you see a marked shift in their desire to engage in activities that used to be among their favorites, that's the time to ask some questions. What's going on? Why all of a sudden, do you not want to be engaged in these things? They may have been exposed to information that is not appropriate for them at that point in their lives. They may be getting bullied, right? Bullying is one of those things that I feel like we do not handle well. Too often, children find themselves in situations that they cannot navigate, and the trusted adults that are supposed to be their allies in those situations,
They're not.
they let them down. And no one is perfect, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't say, you know what, I'm sorry, I should have been available. I should have been able to see the struggle that you were going in. And acknowledging our own mistakes helps children learn how to acknowledge their mistakes, right? We want to get away from that fear of failure. If I make a mistake, it's the end of the world. No,
It's not.
No, it's just an opportunity to learn a different way to do it.
That's it. Let's talk about a safe space. How can we as parents and the community, how can we create a safe space for these kids and teens?
It has to be a shift in the way we communicate to children. For most of our society's development, it's been top down. You do it because I said to do it. Less of the, what do you think we should do? How do you think we should manage this issue? Encouraging them to have a voice, even in making family rules sometimes. All right, what do you think an appropriate consequence for that behavior should be, right? Doesn't mean you have to go with it, because if they said ice cream, well, obviously that is not an appropriate consequence. But giving them voice, giving them some autonomy, right? We raise children to listen, and they become adults, and they don't know how to speak up.
Ladies and gentlemen, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we are having an informative, raw, and real conversation with Elizabeth Cooper. Elizabeth is a licensed outpatient psychotherapist for Cape Fear Valley Health's behavioral health. Elizabeth, let's talk about Black communities. People suffer silently instead of seeking professional health because of that stigma. What would you say to people who feel hesitant, because we discussed this before the broadcast, about treatment and therapy because of those beliefs?
Right. Again, it's a lot about trust, right? Even in the medical community, there's a question of trusting, whether or not there's the interest of the establishment is on the welfare of the patient, right? And so learning that we go through a lot of training on cultural aspects of the patients who walk in our door, and recognizing there is no way for us to understand everyone's culture. It's just not possible. But being humble, having cultural humility, and recognizing that while this may be an issue for this segment of the population, and it may not be an issue for that segment of the population, doesn't make it any less of an issue, right? The recognition that there's a lot of, I think, stigmatization within the Black community, among the members of the Black community. I've had patients who come in and tell me that their nickname is bipolar, right? And I'm like, that's not very helpful, right? Because you are more than your diagnosis. You are an entire human being who has value in a variety of different ways, right? So isolating somebody down to what a diagnosis is isn't fair to them, or even fair to the society in general, because everyone has something to contribute, right? And if somebody is struggling to function or achieve their goals or have healthy, happy relationships, we should want to support them in getting the care or the skills that they need to do better, right? We shouldn't just be, pushing them to the side and saying you're defective. That's not the case at all. Everyone struggles in one aspect or another. To expect people to be perfect or to not have issues is disingenuous.
It really is. Ladies and gentlemen, I forgot to do my housekeeping earlier in the broadcast. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're having a real conversation with Elizabeth Cooper, our in-studio guest today. You still have time to be part of the broadcast, even though I forgot to invite you into the conversation. You can give us a call at 910-483-6111, or if you're following us on Facebook, you can leave the question in the comment section. Lindsay will make sure we get the question answered. And we're also streaming live on YouTube as well. But you can't ask the question on YouTube because Lindsay's only one person. And in addition to that, we want you to share the broadcast, because if you've been following us since the beginning, as you can hear, we have discussed some amazing information, and it's information that needs to be shared, and it's information that you're not going to remember being that middleman. So make sure you share the broadcast so everyone will know what we are doing here at Cape Fear Valley Health. Once again, our in-studio guest, Elizabeth Cooper, licensed outpatient psychotherapist with Cape Fear Valley's Behavioral Health. Elizabeth, what are some healthy ways that we can improve mental health, and even before it reaches that crisis point?
There is a big shift in the way that within the practices of mental health, that we are recognizing that it should be more about mental health, not mental illness, right? Much like we focus on physical health. How can I make my physical health better? Mental health should also be a part of that discussion. And there's a lot of overlap. Getting adequate rest, getting good sleep, managing your diet, making sure that you are not indulging in substances too frequently, because that will alter how you communicate, how you function. And if you want to function better, we need to limit, what we're getting exposed to. The exercise. Now, I'm not saying anybody needs to go out and join a gym, but even just taking a walk in the sunshine is enough to elevate our mood even, just for that period of time. Doing things, self-care. Self-care is anything that allows you to unwind, right? For me, I love to read a good book. For me, that's how I unwind. Some people do like to go to the gym. Some people like to go to the park with their dog and throw the ball. It's whatever brings you a sense of contentment that lets you, even for a couple minutes, forget the challenges of your day. We do need a break from thinking about things. One of my favorite tips for people who have intrusive thoughts is crossword puzzles and word searches. I've actually seen it be very effective for people who have intrusive thoughts of suicide. Every time you have that thought, pick up a word search. Start circling words. The action of doing something with your mind and your hands distracts you enough so that you can focus on something else. So it's an excellent tool to use.
Well, you just really gave us one coping strategy. Are there other daily habits or coping strategies that will help us with our mental wellness?
Breathing. There's been a lot of focus on different types of breathing. Research has demonstrated that cyclical breathing, or cyclical sighing, is the most effective way of lowering our arousal when we're feeling dysregulated. And cyclical sighing is essentially, and I'll do it here with you guys right now.
Okay.
You're going to breathe in super deep, all the way to the pit of the belly. Hold it, and breathe out super slowly. Breathe in super deep. Hold it. Breathe out super slowly. Breathe in super deep. Hold it. Breathe out super slowly. Usually after that third deep breath and slow breath out, you will feel like a calmness.
You
come
really
over.
do.
Yeah.
You really do.
It's really very effective.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an amazing broadcast today. We are our in-studio guest, Miss Elizabeth Cooper, with Cape Fear Valley's Behavioral Health. Resting and taking breaks. I know a lot of people feel guilty. I have to tell people to rest all the time, but they feel guilty. Omega, I've got to be doing something. No, you don't. Why is rest so important for our emotional health?
Our brains have a certain capacity for processing information, right? And when we are actively doing something, but our mind is going, trying to think about a million different things, the ability of us to be effective in anything we do is limited, right? Because our brains are not designed to multitask in that way. Additionally, if you overwork your brain, you are going to be tired. You're going to have fatigue. You're going to put yourself in situations that aren't going to be healthy for you. Taking breaks and finding opportunities to rest allow you to take a moment, right? And then come back to these activities, and you'll find that you're more effective at what you're doing by doing that. The opposite side of that, actually, is that people who have experienced a lot of trauma or have a lot of mental health challenges, they tend to be addicted to staying busy. Because if they're staying busy, they don't have to think about those things, right? And so it often is demonstrated in deteriorating health, right? They wind up getting sick because they're not taking care of their bodies.
And it does. Internalizing stress will definitely do that. Elizabeth, let's talk about the services, because I see I'm keeping an eye on time here. Let's talk about the services that are available through Cape Fear Valley Health. You mainly deal with the adults, but would you be able to give us the resources that are available for children as well?
At the Behavioral Health Center and in the Community Mental Health Center, we do have therapists who focus primarily on children.
Okay.
So there's, and they cover from autism to ADHD to, really a plethora of different issues that children tend to struggle with. There's also the suicide and crisis lifeline, dialing 988. You can also text it. They're available, and they will talk you through, right? They're not going to send police to your house or what have you. They will literally kind of evaluate what's going on, give you tips, resources, so that you can manage those issues without needing to go to the hospital. But should they determine that your situation is severe and you do need medical intervention, then they will assist you in getting to that. Whether it's, having you call 911, or here in this area, we have the Alliance Health Crisis Line, and they have mobile crisis services. And their number, and I'm going to give it to you right now, is 877-223-4617. There are a variety of different resources online. There's the National Association of Mental Illness, National Alliance of Mental Illness. There's helplines. Cape Fear Valley has our behavioral health center that you can reach at 910-615-3333 to schedule an appointment. We do things from medication management, which is for people who require medication. Not everybody does. And then therapy services, family services. There's a lot that's available. And so I would believe that for the vast majority of people, we have something that will help them.
Can therapy help people even if they are not experiencing a mental crisis?
Absolutely. Learning those coping skills, the cyclical sighing, recognizing the symptoms when they do emerge to a certain level and how to get care at that time. Coaching, honestly, to some extent, on whatever challenges that a person is facing, especially interpersonal relationships. A lot of times, emotion regulation becomes a challenge. People often come in and they're like, I just get so angry and I don't know why and I don't know how to control it. We can help you learn those skills to control your anger, to help you have better relationships. Because, the human relationship, the interpersonal reactions that we have are fundamental to the human experience, right? And it's so critically important that we recognize when we are struggling to have those good relationships. How can I make changes or set limits and boundaries? Huge thing, setting limits and boundaries. Because sometimes, especially if we've lived our whole lives being the person who fixes things, right? And then we get to a point where the expectation is that we're going to fix everyone's problems. And we stop saying no. We stop saying, I can't do that right now. I've got this other thing going on. And we stretch ourselves too thin because we're trying to be everything to everyone. People get used to that relationship. Oh, she'll do it. She's always done it. She can do it. He can do it. And they stop recognizing that, is it fair? Is it right? Is it equitable to be expecting somebody to always be available to us? Right? And so putting in limits and boundaries and reminding people that I'm a human being too. I have challenges. I have needs. I need sleep. I can't always be on my A game for everyone because then I'm not on my A game for me.
Exactly. I always say no is a complete sentence.
I like that. I might use it. I'm going to steal it.
What message would you give to someone who feels that they are tired of being tired? They're emotionally exhausted. They're overwhelmed. They feel alone. What advice would you give to them today, Elizabeth?
Each individual person is different. Some people, I would say, you need a weekend away. You need to get away from those stressors, right? That's not possible for everyone, right? Turning off the phone, turning off the TV, turning off the social media, right? Those are all ways to kind of pull back from those things that are stressing us out. If it's a situation at work or school, communicate that with somebody. Most employers have that employee assistance program and things of that nature who will assist you in getting the care that you need so that you can continue to be an asset to that organization. But more than that, right? We all have a cup of love, kindness that we pour out all day long. And at the end of the day, is your cup empty? Right? What fills your cup? Identify the things that fills your cup. allows you to be more present to your own life and be more effective in your own life. And then do those things. Maybe it's travel. Maybe it's some kind of physical activity. Maybe you love to cook. Whatever it is, that thing that fills your cup and makes you feel like, yes, that's what you really need to engage in.
Elizabeth, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm very honored that you allowed me to.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth Cooper, a psychotherapist with behavioral health care for Cape Fear Valley Health. Now remember, taking care of your health, your mental health, it is just as important, as Elizabeth said, as taking care of your physical health. So if you need someone, or if you or someone you know, you need support, you need therapy, you need treatment, help is available. And what I want you to do is learn more about behavioral health care services by visiting Cape Fear Valley's website at capefearvalleyhealth.com. Now, before we close out today's broadcast, Harnett County, I have some information for you. North Carolina Med Assistance Mobile Free Pharmacy, along with Allied Health, they are hosting an over-the-counter medicine giveaway and community event. Now, this is going to be in Lillington in Harnett County, and it takes place on Friday, June 5th from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. At the Harnett County building. You're going to be able to take home free, did you hear me right? Free over-the-counter medicines, which include allergy medicine. You can pick me up some when you're picking it up. Allergy medicine, cough and cold, pain relief, vitamins, children's medicine, and so much more. Now, you can order ahead online, or you can wait to come to the event, and when you schedule online, you can also schedule a pickup time. Now, this is open to all North Carolina residents, so you don't have to be a Harnett County resident, but you do have to be 18 or older in order to receive the medicine. And did I mention it's free? So Lindsay, she is going to put the information and the details on Facebook, so make sure you go there to get the information. Ladies and gentlemen, mark the date. Our next broadcast is Tuesday, May 26th. We are going to discuss stroke awareness. So for our producers, Lindsey Graham and Ray Thomas, and the team behind the scenes, I'm Omega Jones. Thanks so much for listening to and watching Cape Fear Valley Health's Making Rounds Live.
A federal court unsealed an indictment today charging 3 defendants with conspiring to defraud the United States after the ship Dolly knocked down the Francis Scott Key Bridge in March of 2024 and caused the death of 6 construction workers. The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services is monitoring the recent hantavirus outbreak. Republican Senator Josh Hawley says he is backing President Trump's push to suspend the federal gas tax to ease the squeeze drivers are feeling at the pump. It will take an act of Congress to produce the 18 cent a gallon discount at the pump.